The beauty of science fiction is that despite the fantastical setting, it can be used to tell stories that are very relevant to current events. Sometimes all you need to do to help change people's minds is get them to step back and look at a similar problem from a different position. And Batman Beyond often did something similar with its sci-fi setting, putting together stories that were relevant to present-day audiences. And that's what I want to talk about in this video, the Batman Beyond episode Rats. Rats has the distinction of introducing two new villains, the first being Mad Stan, who I have already talked about in a separate video. Go watch that one if you haven't already, I have linked to it in the info button in the top right corner. The second villain was Patrick Fitz, also known as the Rat Boy. While Patrick shares the spotlight with the debuting Mad Stan, he is the primary antagonist of the story, and this was a recurring thing with Mad Stan, by the way. He was almost always the secondary villain in his stories. Now, before we get to Patrick, I wanted to clear up a common misconception about this character. Patrick is often described as the DCAU version of Ratcatcher, Otis Flanagan, who first appeared in Detective Comics 585. Flanagan had been a pest control worker for Gotham City, but he was sent to prison for a decade after he was blamed for the death of a man during a street brawl. While rotting away in Blackgate, Flanagan had an epiphany of sorts, realizing that people are the true pests, not rodents and insects. After all, he had loyally served the city, dealing with their pest problems for years, and this was how he was rewarded. Locked in a hellish jail, Flanagan decided to instead befriend the rats that infested the prison and train them to follow his orders, a bit like an even more twisted version of the Pied Piper of Hamelin. When he got out of prison, he took revenge on the officials that sent him to prison by kidnapping them and locking them up in the sewers, tormenting them with his rats for years. The sewers of Gotham City were cavernous, and nobody thought to look there for the missing people, which made it the perfect hiding place for Ratcatcher. Now, I don't want to spend any more time talking about Ratcatcher because the writer of Rats, Rich Vogel, has stated definitively that he did not have Ratcatcher in mind when writing this story. Therefore, Patrick is not intended to be a futuristic version of Ratcatcher. And funnily enough, this wouldn't be the first time that the creative team had come up with a character that had some similarities to an existing character, completely unintentionally. I guess it's true what they say, there are no entirely original ideas. But the thing is, there aren't actually that many similarities between Patrick and Ratcatcher. They both live in the sewers, yeah. They have an affinity for rodents, okay. And feel like they've been rejected by society. But that's it. I think sometimes people see characters with similar gimmicks and jump to conclusions. He controls rats and hangs out in the sewers. That must be a reference. A bit like how all those people watching HBO's The Penguin claim that his assistant Victor is going to become either Mr. Freeze or Mr. Zaz, simply because his first name is Victor. Ugh. But Patrick is a very different character. For starters, he isn't motivated by vengeance. Well, not really. He's a sad and lonely figure that presents himself as a trademark nice guy that just wants to have a girlfriend. Someone to accept his love so he can show them what a kind and caring person he is. However, beneath the facade, Patrick is a jealous, controlling brute. His love and kindness comes with conditions. Rats uses the sci-fi trappings of a weird mutant boy, living in the sewers, with the ability to command giant rats, to tell a sadly all too common story of fragile masculinity and the objectification of women. Patrick presents himself as someone that cares about the discarded and the lost, both objects and people. He collects up treasures for his own collection, discarded terrific trio action figures for instance, and proudly puts them on display in his home. The fact that the trio were disgraced after they threatened to blow up Neo Gotham means nothing to him. All he sees are unwanted toys, and he feels empathy for them because that's how Patrick views himself. Something cool that people just threw away because of how he looks. If they just knew the real him, they'd realise how wonderful he was, he argues. Patrick fills the gaping void in his heart with things in his collection. He values these objects above pretty much anything else, aside from maybe his pet rats. Patrick's relationship with the rats seems to be loving, but that's only because these oversized beasts obey his commands. Regarding Patrick's appearance, it's not entirely clear why he looks the way he does. I don't think he's a splicer, because splicing can be undone. If he had chosen to resemble a rat and was rejected because of it, he could have just undone it. Does that mean that he's some sort of mutant, kind of like Killer Croc had been in Batman the Animated Series? I think so, yes. Having said that, I do like the idea that Patrick chose to splice himself with a rat, so that he'd then have an excuse as to why people rejected him, rather than simply facing the fact that he is a deeply flawed person. Patrick is jealous. Patrick is controlling. Patrick is a stalker, and everyone can see that. He may act kind and charming when he first meets these women, making them think that he could be a nice person that was misjudged because of his looks, but he had been spying on Dana to learn all he could about her frustrations with Terry missing their dates, about her father's objections to her relationship with Terry, and how worthless she felt. And he tries to exploit those negative feelings to get her to stay underground with him. But this is no kind of life for anyone, never mind a teenage girl. When Dana objects to his insane plan and wants to go home, Patrick sicks his rats on her and discloses that he had murdered other girls for refusing to accept his help, and for making fun of him. It's not clear how many of them there have been, but an earlier news report talks about multiple people going missing and being eaten by giant rats, so it's likely quite a few. I also find it disturbing how he specifically targets women that he views as vulnerable. He stalks and studies women, targeting those that appear to be underappreciated, ignored, or rejected, and tries to take advantage of their emotional state, love-bombing them by showering them with flowers, telling them that he understands them and will appreciate them the way they deserve to be. He can't see how awful a life it is to be trapped underground. He may have developed a type of flower that can grow without sunlight, something that he compares to Dana, but people generally don't work that way. Patrick is manipulative and delusional. He tells Dana that people clearly don't care about or appreciate her, preying on her insecurities to try and persuade her to do what he wants. But Patrick doesn't know Dana at all. She has faith in herself and refuses to fall for his tricks. And Patrick cannot handle rejection at all. When Batman intervenes, Dana accidentally causes the lake of toxic waste to burst into flames, setting Patrick's home on fire. While the news report states that there were no recorded casualties, it's hard to imagine how Patrick and his rats could have survived such a blaze. And yet he did, and returned in the pages of Batman Beyond Volume 2, number 17, written by series writer Hilary J. Bader. While most Batman Beyond comics aren't connected to the same continuity as the show, as I always say, if it's written by one of the creative team members, then it counts. It transpires that Patrick survived the fire, but was hideously burnt, although he still thought he could make a go of things with Dana. His new scheme involved sending his rats to infest prominent businesses across the city, and then acted as an exterminator who would clear the persistent infestation at a high price. With his newfound wealth, he had his teeth fixed and bought a mansion, although he still lived in the sewers below it, because that's where he was comfortable. He thought the prestige of having a large home above ground and lots of money would be all it took to persuade Dana to love him, completely ignoring the fact that she detested him because of his personality, and it just goes to show how shallow and delusional he is, and how little he actually does think of Dana that she would be persuaded by mere possessions. Batman fought off Patrick's rat army by flooding the sewer, which also swept Patrick away. While it was assumed that he had drowned, the issue ends with a pair of evil eyes leering at Terry, Max and Dana from a storm drain, suggesting that Patrick was alive and well. It doesn't seem like he planned on moving on from his obsession with Dana, and I suppose that is reflective of one of my criticisms of these comic books. While they often did things to develop the characters, Ink attempting to cure herself, Stalker getting captured by Batman, usually, by the end of the issue, the status quo was restored, making the whole thing feel a bit redundant. This was the reality of writing a comic book that tied into a TV show. It couldn't contradict the events of the show, or make changes that were too drastic, for fear that they may eventually contradict a later episode. As such, you could easily get by without reading these comics, but if you're a fan of the show, I do recommend them. To close things out, I think one of the most significant things about Patrick is that he thinks of himself as a tragic figure. Oh, poor Patrick, he's so kind and caring. People just can't get past his weird face. But the reality is he's a controlling stalker. He targeted women that he believed to be vulnerable, and attempted to manipulate them into living with him. He may try to present himself as a nice guy, but it doesn't take very much for the facade to slip and he resorts to violence. He's an emotionally abusive, insecure, controlling creep that treated women like possessions, and their rejection of him had nothing to do with his weird appearance.
Okay, that's it for this week's essay. If you like the video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, tell all your friends about me. You know how YouTube works. If you really enjoyed the video and have the means, please consider making use of the thanks button to send a buck or two my way, because every little helps. I offer channel memberships for $1.99 a month. This will get you early access to my weekly video essay, priority responses to your comments, members-only videos, custom emojis, and an icon on your profile indicating that you're one of my people. And special thanks to my current channel members, who are all listed on the screen right now.
Next time I'm going to return to the skyscrapers that tower over Gotham City to talk about one of Batman's most delusional foes, Maxi Zeus, a man whose mind snapped and he started to believe that he was the literal personification of the ancient Greek god Zeus. And he jumped through some really impressive mental hoops to live his fantasy. Hope to see you then.